I want to tell you a story. It is not an easy story. It is a story that still lives in my heart, even after many years. It is about friendship, love, pain, and memory. It is about me and someone who was like a brother to me. His name was Daniel, but I always called him Dan. We were more than just friends. We were two souls who grew up side by side, always together. Sometimes, when I think about him, I smile. Sometimes, when I think about him, I cry. This story is about both the smiles and the tears. It is about how life can give you the brightest gift and then take it away. But it is also about how even in sadness, you can find meaning. When I was young, I did not think much about life or death. I believed that good things would last forever. I believed that the people I loved would always stay close to me. Dan and I shared everything. We shared food, jokes, secrets, and dreams. We were like two trees growing in the same garden, roots touching under the ground. I thought nothing could ever separate us. But I was wrong. Life is full of surprises, and not all of them are happy ones. I still remember the first time I felt something strange, something dark moving quietly in the background. At that time, I did not know what it was. I just felt it in the air, like a storm hiding behind the clouds. I remember sitting with Dan one afternoon, laughing about something silly. But in his eyes, for just a second, I saw tiredness. I saw a shadow. It was small, and I ignored it. I told myself, he is fine. He is always fine. I did not know then that this shadow would grow, and that one day it would cover both of us. This story begins with love, but it also carries pain. It begins with two boys full of life, but it will take you to a hospital room filled with silence. Still, I want you to listen carefully. Because inside the sadness, there is something important. There is a lesson. Sometimes the last words of a friend can become the first lesson of a new life. This is the story of my friend Dan. And this is the story of how his last words changed me forever. My friend's name was Daniel, but everyone called him Dan. He was the kind of person who made a room brighter just by walking in. His smile was wide and real, the kind of smile that reached his eyes. He laughed often, and when he laughed, it was impossible not to laugh with him. His voice was warm, and his words were always kind. When I was with him, I felt lighter, as if all the heavy things in life could wait. He had that effect on people. He made you believe that everything would be okay, even on the hardest days. We spent most of our childhood side by side. We went to the same school, sat in the same classrooms, and walked the same dusty roads home. We played football in the open field behind our houses until the sun went down and our mothers called us inside. We shared food from our lunchboxes, traded toys, and even exchanged secrets we never told anyone else. Sometimes, we argued, but even our fights never lasted long. It was impossible to stay angry at Dan. He always found a way to turn anger into laughter. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can still hear his voice. I can hear him calling my name, teasing me about being slow on the football field, or telling me not to give up when I was tired. Those sounds feel alive in my memory, but at the same time, they are far away. They are like echoes from a place I can never return to. Because time moves on, and life changes, even when we are not ready. And in the middle of those bright and simple days, a shadow was waiting. When I was a child, I thought friendship was something easy. You meet someone, you like them, and then you stay together forever. That was how it felt with Dan. He was not just a friend who visited sometimes. He was always there. When I fell from my bicycle and cut my knee, he was the one who helped me stand up. He brought water and laughed at my tears, not to be cruel, but to make me forget the pain. When I failed a test at school and felt ashamed, he said, "Don't worry. You will do better next time." He always believed in me, even when I could not believe in myself. His faith in me was like a small fire that kept burning, even when everything else felt dark. We had big dreams together. We used to sit on the roof of his house at night, looking at the stars. We imagined our futures, far away from our small town. We wanted to travel. We wanted to see the ocean, because neither of us had ever seen it before. We wanted to climb mountains and discover new places. Sometimes we even said, one day, we will go everywhere. At that time, the world felt so open, like a book waiting for us to read. With Dan beside me, I believed all those dreams would come true. I thought those nights would never end. I thought we would always have time. That is the thing about being young, you do not think about time. You believe you have endless days and endless chances. But life is not endless. Time is not endless. I would learn that lesson too soon, and in a way I never expected. One of my favorite memories with Dan was from a summer afternoon. The sun was hot, and the air was heavy, but we still decided to play football in the empty field. We ran until our shirts were wet and our faces red. At one point, I was too tired and wanted to stop, but Dan shouted, "Come on, just one more goal." His energy never seemed to end. We laughed so hard that day when I tripped over the ball and fell into the grass. Dan fell too, not because he was clumsy, but because he laughed so much he couldn't stand. That was the kind of joy we had together. Simple, pure, and unforgettable. There were also quiet moments. Sometimes, after playing, we sat under a tree with a bottle of cold water, sharing sips and talking about nothing important. We talked about teachers, about silly classmates, and about the future we imagined. I remember he once told me, "I want to be someone who makes people happy." That was exactly who he already was, even as a boy. He did not know how much light he carried inside him. He did not know that his words and laughter were gifts to everyone around him. Looking back, I think those small days were the real treasures of my life. At the time, they felt ordinary. We did not know we were making memories that would stay forever. We just lived them, like normal children. But now, those moments are like gold in my heart. They remind me of who Dan was, and of who we were together. They remind me that joy can be simple, but it can also be strong enough to last a lifetime. Everything changed one cold morning. I was at school, waiting for Dan, but he did not come. At first, I thought he was late. He was sometimes slow in the mornings, and I even laughed to myself, imagining him still half asleep in bed. But when the first class started and his chair stayed empty, I began to feel uneasy. At lunch, a teacher came to me and said softly, "Your friend is sick. He will not be in school for some time." My heart jumped. I did not understand what "sick" meant in that moment. Maybe a fever? Maybe just the flu? I told myself it was nothing serious. He would be back in a few days, smiling and joking again. But the days passed, and he did not return. I visited his house, and his mother met me at the door. She looked tired, her eyes red as if she had cried. She told me Dan was resting and could not see anyone yet. Her voice was gentle but heavy, and I felt fear rising inside me. Something was wrong, something bigger than I wanted to believe. Finally, after a week, I saw him. He was lying in bed, thinner than before, his face pale. He tried to smile when he saw me, and I tried to smile back, but it was not the same. There was a weakness in him I had never seen before. He spoke quietly, almost whispering, and said, "Don't worry, it's just something small." I nodded, pretending to believe him, but deep inside my chest, I felt the first crack of pain. I did not know it yet, but our lives had just entered a storm. At first, I wanted to believe Dan's words. I wanted to think it was something small, something that would pass. But each time I visited him, I saw the truth more clearly. He grew weaker, not stronger. His laugh became softer, and sometimes it disappeared completely. He no longer came outside to play football, and the ball we used to kick every day now rested untouched in the corner of his room. His eyes still carried warmth, but I could also see tiredness behind them, like a candle burning low. His parents tried to stay strong, but I noticed the fear on their faces. His mother spoke gently, but her hands shook when she touched his blanket. His father walked around quietly, as if he was carrying a heavy weight that no one else could see. Whenever I asked what was wrong, they said, "He will be fine soon." But their voices did not sound sure. I wanted to believe them, yet deep inside, I knew something serious was happening. I remember one evening very clearly. I was sitting beside his bed, telling him about school. I tried to make him laugh with a silly story about a teacher, but instead of laughing loudly as before, he just smiled a little. Then he closed his eyes and said, "I'm so tired today." Those words cut me deeply, because Dan was never tired. He was always full of energy. Hearing him say that felt like the world had turned upside down. That night, when I walked home, I cried for the first time. I did not want anyone to see, so I kept my tears quiet. But in my heart, I felt fear growing stronger. I did not know how bad it was, but I knew our happy days were changing into something I was not ready to face. Soon, Dan was taken to the hospital. The word itself felt heavy to me. Hospitals were places for broken bones or short fevers, not for my best friend. I still remember the first time I walked into his hospital room. The walls were white, the lights too bright, and the smell of medicine filled the air. I saw him lying in a bed that looked too big for his thin body. Tubes and wires were around him, and machines made soft beeping sounds. My heart hurt to see him like that. He looked smaller than before, weaker, but when he saw me, he still gave me a smile. It was not the strong, wide smile I knew, but it was enough to make me walk closer. I sat on the chair beside him and did not know what to say. Should I ask if he was okay? Should I tell him I was scared? In the end, I just said, "Hey, I missed you at school." He laughed softly and answered, "Lucky you, no boring lessons for me." Even in that place, even with all the pain, he tried to make me smile. That was who Dan was. We talked about small things. I told him stories from outside, about classmates, about a football game, about silly things people did. He listened quietly, sometimes nodding, sometimes smiling. I wanted him to feel normal, even just for a few minutes. I wanted to bring the outside world into that small room, so he would not feel trapped. When it was time to leave, I looked back at him before stepping out. He raised his hand slowly, weakly, but the gesture was full of strength. That wave told me, "Don't give up on me." And I promised myself I never would. The hospital became our new meeting place. Every day after school, I would go to see Dan. Sometimes, I brought a sandwich or a chocolate bar, things he liked. He ate slowly, but he always smiled when I handed him food. We talked a lot, trying to forget the machines and the white walls. Sometimes, we joked like we used to in the field, pretending the bed was a football goal. Those moments were small, but they felt precious, like treasures we had found in a storm. I noticed his voice getting weaker, and sometimes he fell asleep while I was talking. I would sit quietly, holding his hand, afraid to move. I was afraid he would wake up and find me crying. But I could not hide the fear in my heart. I wanted him to get better. I wanted things to go back to the way they were. But deep down, I started to realize that this time might be different. Still, we found hope in small things. One afternoon, he asked me to tell him a story about our football team. I described every goal, every mistake, and every laugh we shared. He listened with his eyes half closed, and then he smiled. "I feel like I am there with you," he whispered. That smile, though quiet, gave me hope. It told me he could still feel joy, even here. I wanted to believe in miracles, and for a little while, I did. But at the same time, I felt the weight of reality pressing down. I could see the truth in the tired lines of his face and the quiet way he breathed. Fear and hope lived together in that small hospital room. And I realized that love and friendship were stronger than fear, even when the future looked dark. One day, the doctor came to speak with me. I had walked into the hospital, expecting to see Dan laughing, joking, or at least resting quietly. But the doctor's face was serious. I felt my stomach tighten before he even spoke. "I need to tell you the truth," he said gently. "Dan's illness is very serious. We are doing everything we can, but the time he has is limited." The words hit me like a heavy stone. I could not breathe. My mind felt empty, but at the same time, loud with fear and disbelief. Limited time? How could that be? Dan was my best friend. He was full of life. He had dreams, energy, laughter. How could someone like him have a time limit? I wanted to scream, to tell the doctor that he was wrong. But the doctor was calm and quiet. There was no mistake in his words. I left the room slowly, my hands shaking. Outside, the sun shone, birds were singing, and life went on as usual. But my world had changed. I had entered a new world where my best friend was fragile, where each moment with him was precious, and where fear lived in my chest every second. I walked into Dan's room and sat beside him. I wanted to hold his hand, to tell him I would not leave him. I wanted to find words, but my voice broke before I could speak. Dan looked at me and smiled faintly, as if he could see my pain without me saying anything. "It's okay," he whispered. "I'm still here. Don't be sad." His words were gentle, but my heart ached. I knew then that life could be both cruel and beautiful. It could take away joy, but it also gave us love, even in the hardest moments. And in that moment, I realized that I needed to be brave, not just for myself, but for him. After hearing the doctor, I could not stop thinking about what he said. Limited time. Those words repeated in my mind like a sad song I could not forget. I tried to imagine life without Dan, and the thought made my chest feel heavy. I could not accept it. I wanted to believe it was a mistake. I wanted to wake up from a bad dream and see him laughing again, as if nothing had happened. But every time I visited him, I saw the truth. His body was weaker, and his eyes, though still bright, were tired. I asked myself many questions. Why him? Why now? Why such a wonderful person? I did not find answers. Sometimes, I sat silently in his room, holding his hand, and just watching him breathe. I wanted to take away his pain, to protect him from the cruel world. But I could not. I felt helpless, frustrated, and afraid. I wanted to be strong, but my heart felt broken. Dan noticed my sadness. Even when he was weak, he tried to comfort me. "It's okay," he said one day. "I don't want you to cry. I want you to remember the good times." His words were simple, but they carried a weight I could not lift. I realized then that he was braver than I was. He accepted a truth I could not face, and he wanted me to live fully, even if he could not. That day, I made a silent promise. I promised to stay by him, to cherish every moment, to listen, to laugh, and to be there no matter what. I did not know how long we had, but I knew that every second mattered. And I understood something very important: love and friendship were not measured by time, they were measured by the heart, by the moments we shared, and by the memories we created together. As the days passed, Dan and I talked about many things. Not just school or football, but life itself. Sometimes, he looked at me and asked, "Do you ever think about what makes life good?" I paused, unsure how to answer. I had never thought about it so deeply. But Dan wanted to know, and I wanted to answer him honestly. I said slowly, life is good when you are with people you love, when you feel happy, when you try your best. Dan smiled faintly. Yes, he whispered. That is true. But there is more. Life is also about mistakes, about learning, about forgiving yourself and others. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, because they teach you something. Don't hold anger too long. Life is short, and love is important. I listened carefully, holding his hand. His words were simple, but they felt heavy with wisdom. It was strange, hearing life lessons from someone so young, and yet so fragile. We talked about dreams too. He told me about the places he still wanted to see, the mountains he wanted to climb, the seas he wanted to touch. Even if I cannot go there, he said softly, you must. Go and see the world. Live for both of us. His words filled me with both sadness and hope. I wanted to promise him that I would, but I also felt the weight of the responsibility. Even in his pain, Dan thought about others, about life beyond himself. His courage amazed me. I realized that sometimes, the people who are about to leave teach the most important lessons. And I understood something I had never known before, that listening, really listening, can carry the heart to places it could not reach before. One evening, as the sun set outside the hospital window, Dan spoke again. Do you know what I think makes people happy? He asked quietly. I shook my head. I wanted to hear every word he had to say. It's love, he whispered. Love is the most important thing. Not money, not fame, not success. Love. Love your family, love your friends, love the little things in life. Don't wait for tomorrow to say you care. Say it today. I felt his words deeply. I realized I sometimes took people for granted, especially him. We had been friends for so long, but how often had I told him how much he meant to me? Not enough. And now, hearing his voice so soft, I promised myself I would never let a day pass without showing love. Dan also spoke about mistakes. I made many, he said, with a faint smile. Some hurt me, some hurt others. But I learned. And I forgive myself. You must forgive yourself too. Don't carry anger or guilt like a heavy stone. Life is too short. I nodded, tears forming in my eyes. He was teaching me courage, forgiveness, and hope, even when he could barely move. We also talked about dreams. I have dreams I will not reach, he admitted. But you must. Live fully. Don't be afraid to try, to fail, or to fall. Every dream you chase is a victory. I listened, my heart full of love and sorrow at the same time. His words were soft, but they left marks on my soul. Even as his body grew weaker, his spirit shone brightly. That night, I left the hospital with a heavy heart. But inside, I carried a light, Dan's light. His words stayed with me, like seeds planted deep in the ground, waiting to grow. I realized that sometimes, the lessons we need the most come from those who are leaving us. The next day, I returned to Dan's hospital room. He was lying quietly, looking out the window at the gray sky. I sat beside him, holding his hand as always. He turned to me and said softly, "Do you know what I think about when I close my eyes?" I shook my head, curious. "I think about moments," he said. "Not the big events, not the money or things, but small moments. A laugh with a friend, a warm meal, a sunset. These are what make life rich." I listened and realized he was right. I remembered all the small moments we had shared, kicking the football in the dusty field, sitting under the tree sharing water, laughing at silly jokes. Those memories felt more important than anything else. I understood that even though we could lose time, we could never lose those moments. Dan paused, then whispered something that stayed with me forever. Do not wait for life to be perfect. Life is never perfect. You will have good days and bad days. But even the bad days can teach you something. Even pain can show you love. Remember that. I nodded, my eyes wet. His words were simple, but I felt their strength deep in my heart. We also spoke about fear. I admitted that I was afraid of losing him. He squeezed my hand weakly and said, "Fear is natural, but don't let it stop you from living. Be brave, even when your heart is heavy." His courage amazed me. He was teaching me to live fully, even when he could not. That day, I left the hospital with a new understanding. Life was fragile, but it was also beautiful. And even though I felt sadness and fear, I felt gratitude too, for the chance to learn from someone so special. A few days later, I visited Dan again. The room was quiet, and the machine softly beeped. He was resting, but when he saw me, he smiled. "I want to tell you one more thing," he said. "Life is short, but it is yours. Make it meaningful. Love deeply. Forgive freely. Chase your dreams. And always remember the people who care about you." His voice was weak, but every word was full of meaning. I held his hand and nodded, feeling tears fill my eyes. How could someone so fragile teach so much about living? But he did. He wanted me to understand that even when life feels unfair, there is still beauty. "Do not waste time hating or worrying too much," he continued. "Life is too short for that. Spend your time on love, on kindness, on learning. Every day is a gift, even if it is hard." We talked about friendship, too. "Friends are treasures," he whispered. "Keep them close. Value every moment with them. Sometimes, you don't know how important a moment is until it becomes a memory. Don't wait to say what you feel. Don't wait to show you care." I listened, remembering all our small joys, our arguments, our laughs, our quiet talks. Every memory felt more precious than ever. Before I left that day, he looked at me with a faint smile. "I am glad you are here," he said. "Even if I cannot stay forever, I am happy knowing someone understands me. You make life better just by being here." I could not speak. I only held his hand, feeling the warmth of his spirit and the sadness of knowing that time was short. That day, I left the hospital carrying a new understanding of life. Dan's words were like seeds, planting courage, love, and hope inside me. I realized that even in sadness, there is wisdom, and even in loss, there is beauty. The days grew slower, and Dan's body grew weaker. I could see it in the small movements he could no longer make. Sometimes, he could barely lift his hand to wave at me. Yet, his eyes always shone when he saw me. I would sit beside him, holding his hand, and we would talk quietly about memories, dreams, and small moments that had made us laugh. The hospital room felt heavy with quiet, but it also carried warmth, the warmth of friendship and love. Even in the shadow of illness, we found moments of joy. One morning, I brought him a notebook. "Write your thoughts," I said. He smiled faintly and tried to pick up the pen, but his hand was too weak. I helped him, holding the pen with him as he wrote a few words. They were simple: love, forgive, live fully. Even in weakness, he wanted to share lessons. I realized that sometimes, the strongest people are not the ones who can lift heavy things, but the ones who lift hearts. I promised myself I would remember these words forever. As the days passed, we shared more stories from the past. I reminded him of the time he had tripped in the football field, or the day we stayed up late counting stars. He laughed softly, though the sound was quiet and fragile. Each laugh felt like a small victory against the sadness that surrounded us. Sometimes, we sat in silence, just holding hands. I could feel his breathing slow, yet even in that quiet, there was comfort. I knew that love did not need words, it only needed presence. One afternoon, he whispered to me, "I am proud of you. Keep being kind. Keep being brave." I felt tears burn my eyes, but I held back, knowing he wanted peace in our room, not sorrow. He had always cared for others, even when he was weak. That day, I understood that the essence of a person is not measured by how long they live, but by the love they leave behind. Dan's love was a light that would never fade. The hospital felt quieter each day. Machines beeped, nurses moved softly, and I stayed by his side, sometimes talking, sometimes silent. He grew weaker, but still smiled. One evening, he asked me to tell him stories from outside, school, friends, and even silly jokes. I tried to make him laugh, and he did, softly. I realized that even small joys mattered. They were the last sparks of our shared life, the moments that would remain forever in my heart. During those last days, we spoke about gratitude. He said, "I am grateful for you, for my family, for all the small joys." I held his hand tightly and whispered that I was grateful too, for having him as my friend, for all the memories, for his wisdom. He closed his eyes for a while, smiling faintly. Even as his body weakened, his spirit was strong. He taught me that even in the hardest moments, love, gratitude, and hope can shine brighter than fear. Those days were heavy with sadness, but full of meaning, too. The day came when Dan spoke to me in a way I would never forget. He looked at me with eyes that held all the warmth, love, and wisdom he had shared in the last days. His voice was weak, almost a whisper, but every word carried meaning. "I want you to remember something," he said. "Life is short, but it is beautiful. You must live fully, love deeply, and never give up." I held his hand tightly, feeling both the sadness of knowing this might be our last real conversation and the power of his words. They were simple words, but they felt like a gift, a guide for the life I had yet to live. He paused and took a deep breath, his chest rising slowly. "Do not waste time on anger, fear, or doubt," he continued. "These things only weigh down your heart. Be brave. Be kind. Be grateful for each moment, even the small ones. Live like the world is a treasure, because it is. And remember, the people you love are your greatest gift." I felt tears slide down my face. His hand was cold and soft, but the warmth of his spirit burned brightly in my heart. I nodded, afraid to speak, because I knew my words could not match the depth of what he was giving me. I asked quietly, "Dan, what will you want me to do after?" My voice faltered. He shook his head gently and squeezed my hand. "Do not dwell on me," he whispered. "Carry me in your heart. Make your life strong, meaningful, and full of love. Let every day count." His words struck me deeply. I realized that even though his body was leaving, his spirit was planting lessons in my soul, lessons I would carry forever. That moment became a turning point for me, the moment I understood what it truly meant to live fully and love completely. Even after he rested for a while, he opened his eyes again and smiled faintly. "Promise me you will not be sad all the time," he said softly. "Find joy, even in small things. I want you to live well." I nodded again, holding his hand, feeling both grief and hope. Those were not just words, they were a final map for my life, a path that I knew I had to follow, no matter how hard it would be. The next hours were quiet, but every moment felt full of meaning. I sat beside Dan, holding his hand, listening to his soft breathing. He looked at me and whispered, "Remember to forgive, always. Forgive yourself and forgive others. Life is too short to carry anger or sadness for long." I nodded, tears running down my cheeks, understanding that this was not just advice, it was a gift. He was teaching me how to live even as he prepared to leave. His voice grew softer with each word, but the weight of his lessons became heavier in my heart. Dan spoke again, slowly, each word measured but full of life. "Chase your dreams," he said. "Do not be afraid to fall or fail. Every dream is a step toward who you are meant to be. And never forget to love. Love your family, your friends, and even strangers when you can. Love is what makes life worth living. Let it guide you." I squeezed his hand, feeling both grief and gratitude. How could someone so weak teach me so much about living? His courage was inspiring. His spirit, brighter than ever, showed me that life is measured not by how long it lasts, but by how deeply it is lived. Finally, he gave me words that I would carry forever. Live well. Live fully. Make your days count. And always remember me when you see the little joys, sunsets, laughter, friendship. I may be gone, but my love and lessons are with you. I am proud of you, always. I could not speak. I only held his hand and nodded, feeling a mixture of sadness and peace. Those words, simple but profound, became etched in my heart. They were his last gift to me, the compass that would guide me through the rest of my life. The farewell came quietly. I was holding his hand when he took his last breath. The machines beeped softly and then fell silent. I felt an emptiness in my chest, a hollow that seemed impossible to fill. Yet, even in the grief, I remembered his words, live fully, love deeply, never give up. I stayed beside him for a long time, closing his eyes gently and whispering that I loved him. The pain was sharp, almost unbearable, but I also felt peace. His lessons, his laughter, his love, they would never leave me. After the funeral, life seemed slower, quieter, and heavier. I would walk past places where we had played, sit under the trees where we shared stories, and feel both grief and gratitude. I missed him terribly, but I also felt his presence in every memory. I realized that the love he gave me, the lessons he taught me, and the time we shared were more powerful than death. Even though his body was gone, his spirit lived on in me, guiding me, comforting me, reminding me to live fully. Over time, I began to live differently. I cherished each day, small or big. I told my family I loved them. I forgave people who had hurt me. I pursued dreams I had once been too afraid to chase. I laughed more, even when it was hard. And every time I felt fear, grief, or doubt, I remembered Dan's words, do not waste time on anger or fear. Live fully. His lessons became a part of my daily life, helping me grow stronger, kinder, and more grateful for every moment. I also noticed something beautiful, memories of Dan no longer only brought tears. They brought smiles, warmth, and courage. I could remember our silly jokes, our football games, our late-night talks, and feel joy in the midst of sorrow. I realized that love and friendship are eternal. Even if someone leaves us physically, the impact they make, the lessons they teach, and the love they give remain alive in our hearts forever. Dan's words had changed me, and I knew I would carry them for the rest of my life. Now, I speak directly to you, my friend, my reader. Life is short, and the people we love are precious. Do not wait to show them care, to forgive, or to say, I love you. Cherish the small moments, the laughter, the quiet talks, and even the challenges. Learn from those around you, from friends, family, and even strangers. Time is limited, but love and kindness are unlimited. Hold on to them. Let them guide you, even when life is difficult or unfair. Remember this, sometimes, the last words of a friend can become the first lesson of a new life. Live fully, love deeply, forgive freely, and never give up. Carry memories as treasures and let them light your path. Dan is gone, but his words, his love, and his wisdom live on in me, and they can live in you too. Life may be fragile, but love and friendship are stronger than anything. Treasure each moment, and make your life a story worth remembering.